The pit was dark and cold. 17-year-old Joseph lay at the bottom, looking up at the small circle of blue sky far above his head. His own brothers had thrown him down here. The beautiful coat his father gave him was gone, torn and bloody. He could hear their voices talking about selling him like a piece of cattle. This was not how he thought his dreams would come true. Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob, a wealthy man who owned many sheep and goats. Jacob loved Joseph more than his other 11 sons because Joseph was born when Jacob was old. Joseph's mother Rachel had died when his little brother Benjamin was born, making Joseph even more special to his father. Jacob showed his love by giving Joseph a beautiful coat made of many colors. The coat was long and fancy, the kind that rich people wore. When Joseph put it on, he looked like a young prince. But this gift made his brothers very angry and jealous. The brothers already did not like Joseph because he was their father's favorite. Now this coat made things much worse. They began to hate Joseph so much that they could not say a kind word to him. Every time they saw that colorful coat, their hearts filled with anger. Then Joseph made things even harder for himself. He began having strange dreams, and he told his brothers about them. In the first dream, Joseph and his brothers were working in the wheat field, tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, Joseph's bundle stood up straight and tall. All his brothers' bundles came around Joseph's bundle and bowed down to it. When Joseph told his brothers this dream, they became furious. "Do you think you will rule over us?" they asked angrily. "Do you think we will bow down to you like you are our king?" They hated him even more after hearing this dream. But Joseph had another dream, and he told this one too. "What kind of dream is this?" Jacob asked. "Do you think your mother and I and your brothers will bow down to you?" Jacob scolded Joseph, but deep in his heart, he wondered what these dreams might mean. The brothers' hatred grew stronger each day. They could not forget Joseph's dreams or his beautiful coat. When they saw him coming, they would stop talking and give him mean looks. Joseph felt alone and confused. He did not understand why his brothers hated him so much. One day, Jacob sent Joseph on a long journey to check on his brothers. They had taken the sheep to find grass in a place called Shechem, far from home. Jacob wanted to know if his sons and the animals were safe and healthy. Joseph put on his colorful coat and started walking. The journey took many hours under the hot sun. When he got to Shechem, his brothers were not there. A man found Joseph walking around looking lost. "What are you looking for?" the man asked. "I am looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "They are taking care of sheep. Have you seen them?" "Yes, I heard them say they were going to a place called Dothan," the man told him. So Joseph walked even farther to Dothan. He was tired and thirsty, but he kept going because his father had asked him to find his brothers. When the brothers saw Joseph coming from far away, still wearing his bright coat, their anger exploded like fire. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other with mean voices. "Now is our chance to get rid of him forever. Let us kill him and throw his body into one of these deep pits," said one brother. "We can tell our father that a wild animal ate him. Then we will see what happens to his big dreams." But Reuben, the oldest brother, did not want to kill Joseph. He had a plan to save him. "Let us not kill him ourselves," Reuben said. "Just throw him into this empty pit. Do not hurt him with your hands." Reuben planned to come back later and pull Joseph out when the other brothers were not looking. The brothers agreed to Reuben's idea. When Joseph reached them, they grabbed him roughly. They ripped off his beautiful colored coat, the one that made them so jealous. Then they picked him up and threw him down into a deep, empty pit that used to hold water. Joseph landed hard at the bottom. The pit was about 20 feet deep with smooth walls that he could not climb. He called up to his brothers, begging them to pull him out, but they would not listen. Instead, they sat down nearby and ate their lunch as if nothing had happened. They could hear Joseph crying and calling for help, but they did not care. While they were eating, they saw a group of traders coming toward them. These were Ishmaelite merchants with camels loaded with spices, perfume, and other goods. They were traveling to Egypt to sell their things. Judah, one of the brothers, had an idea. "What good will it do us to kill Joseph?" he said. Let us sell him to these traders instead. That way we will get money, and we will not have his blood on our hands. After all, he is still our brother." The other brothers thought this was a good plan. When the traders came close, the brothers pulled Joseph up out of the pit. Joseph was happy for a moment, thinking his brothers had changed their minds. But then he saw them talking to the strange men and counting silver coins. The traders looked at Joseph and saw that he was young and strong. They agreed to buy him for 20 pieces of silver. This was the price of a slave. Joseph could not believe what was happening. His own brothers were selling him like an animal. "Please do not do this," Joseph cried. "I am your brother. Father is waiting for me to come home." But the brothers had already made their deal. The traders tied Joseph's hands and made him walk behind their camels. As they led him away, Joseph looked back at his brothers with tears in his eyes. He could not understand how they could be so cruel. The brothers took Joseph's torn coat and dipped it in the blood of a goat they killed. Then they went home to their father Jacob. They showed him the bloody coat and said, "We found this. Look at it carefully. Is this your son's coat?" Jacob recognized the beautiful colored coat right away. His heart broke into pieces. "It is my son's coat," he cried. "A wild animal has killed him. Joseph has been torn apart." Jacob was so sad that he tore his own clothes and put on rough cloth to show his grief. He cried for Joseph every day for many weeks. All his children tried to comfort him, but Jacob refused to stop crying. "I will be sad for my son until the day I die," he said. But Jacob did not know that Joseph was still alive. The traders had taken Joseph far away to Egypt, the land of pyramids and great kings. There they sold him to a man named Potiphar, who was an important officer in Pharaoh's army. Pharaoh was the king of all Egypt. At first, Joseph felt scared and alone in this strange new country. Everything was different in Egypt. The people looked different, spoke a different language, and worshipped different gods. Joseph was no longer the favorite son wearing a beautiful coat. Now he was just a slave who had to do whatever his master told him. But Joseph did not give up hope. He remembered that God was with him, even in this hard place. Joseph decided to work as hard as he could and to be honest and kind, no matter how people treated him. Potiphar noticed that Joseph was different from other slaves. Everything Joseph did turned out well. When Joseph took care of the house, it became more organized and clean. When Joseph managed the money, there was always enough. When Joseph was in charge of other servants, they worked better and were happier. Potiphar saw that the Lord was blessing everything Joseph touched, so he made Joseph the manager of his whole house. Joseph was in charge of all Potiphar's money, his servants, and his business. Potiphar trusted Joseph completely and did not worry about anything except what food to eat for dinner. Because Joseph was there, God blessed Potiphar's house. Everything Potiphar owned grew and became more valuable. Joseph went from being a slave to being the most important person in the house after Potiphar himself. Joseph was handsome and strong, and he carried himself like a prince even though he was a slave. Potiphar's wife noticed how good-looking Joseph was, and she began to want him for herself. Day after day, she tried to get Joseph to do wrong things with her. But Joseph refused every time. "Look," he told her. "My master trusts me with everything in this house. He has made me equal to himself. The only thing he has not given me is you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a terrible thing? It would be a sin against God." No matter how much she asked, Joseph always said no. He tried to stay away from her as much as possible. But one day, when all the other servants were gone, she grabbed Joseph's clothes and tried to force him to stay with her. Joseph ran away so fast that he left his coat in her hands. When Potiphar's wife saw that Joseph had run away, she became very angry. She decided to get him in trouble by telling lies about him. When Potiphar came home, his wife showed him Joseph's coat and said, "That Hebrew slave you brought here tried to attack me, but when I screamed for help, he ran away and left his coat behind." Potiphar became furious when he heard this story. He did not ask Joseph what really happened. Instead, he had Joseph arrested and thrown into the king's prison, where they kept people who had done crimes against Pharaoh. So Joseph found himself in another dark place, just like the pit his brothers had thrown him into. But even in prison, God was still with Joseph. The prison keeper noticed that Joseph was honest and helpful. Soon, Joseph was put in charge of all the other prisoners. In this prison, there were two men who used to work for Pharaoh. One was the king's baker, who made bread and cakes. The other was the king's wine taster, who made sure the king's drinks were safe. Both men had made Pharaoh angry, so they were locked up. One night, both men had strange dreams that worried them. In the morning, Joseph saw that they looked upset. "Why do you look so sad today?" he asked them. "We both had dreams last night, but there is no one here who can tell us what they mean," they said. Joseph remembered his own dreams from long ago. "God is the one who explains dreams," Joseph told them. "Tell me what you dreamed, and maybe God will help me understand what they mean." The wine taster told his dream first. "I dreamed I saw a grapevine with 3 branches. The branches grew buds, then flowers, then ripe grapes. I took the grapes and squeezed their juice into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup to Pharaoh to drink." Joseph smiled. "Here is what your dream means," he said. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will forgive you and give you back your old job. You will again serve wine to the king just like before." Then Joseph made a request. "When everything goes well for you, please remember me. Tell Pharaoh about me and help me get out of this prison. I was stolen from my homeland, and I have done nothing wrong here to deserve being locked up." The baker heard Joseph's good explanation for the wine taster's dream, so he decided to tell his dream too. "I dreamed that I had 3 baskets of bread on my head. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But birds came and ate the food right out of the basket on my head." Joseph's face became serious. He did not want to give bad news, but he had to tell the truth. "Here is what your dream means," he said sadly. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will have you killed. Your body will hang on a pole, and birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. The king had a big party for all his servants. Just as Joseph had said, Pharaoh gave the wine taster his job back. But the baker was killed, exactly as Joseph had predicted. Joseph had been right about both dreams. But the wine taster forgot all about Joseph once he was free and back in his comfortable job at the palace. Joseph stayed in prison for 2 more long years, wondering if anyone would ever remember him. Then one night, Pharaoh himself had 2 very strange dreams that worried him greatly. In the first dream, he was standing by the Great Nile River. 7 fat, healthy cows came up from the river and began eating grass. Then 7 thin, ugly cows came up from the river. These thin cows were so skinny that Pharaoh had never seen cows that looked so terrible. The thin cows ate up the 7 fat cows, but even after eating them, the thin cows still looked just as skinny and ugly as before. In the second dream, Pharaoh saw 7 full, healthy heads of grain growing on one stalk. Then 7 thin heads of grain, dried up by the hot desert wind, grew up after them. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads of grain. Pharaoh woke up very troubled by these dreams. In the morning, he called for all the wise men and magicians in Egypt. He told them his dreams and asked them to explain what they meant. But none of them could give him an answer that made sense. Then the wine taster suddenly remembered Joseph. He told Pharaoh about the Hebrew slave in prison who had correctly explained his dream and the baker's dream 2 years before. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. The guards rushed to the prison and brought Joseph out. They gave him clean clothes and let him shave and wash. Then they brought him to stand before the most powerful king in the world. "I have heard that you can explain dreams," Pharaoh said to Joseph. Joseph was careful to give God the credit. "I cannot do it myself," he said, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he needs." So Pharaoh told Joseph both dreams about the cows and the grain. When he finished, Joseph knew immediately what God was telling the king. "Both dreams mean the same thing," Joseph explained. "God is showing Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads of grain represent 7 years of great plenty. There will be more food in Egypt than anyone has ever seen. But the 7 thin cows and the 7 thin heads of grain represent 7 years of terrible famine that will come after the good years. The famine will be so bad that people will forget all about the good years. If nothing is done to prepare, many people will die of hunger. Joseph continued, God gave Pharaoh the same dream twice because this will definitely happen, and it will happen soon. Now Pharaoh should find a wise man to put in charge of preparing for the famine. During the 7 good years, this person should collect and store 1/5 of all the grain that grows in Egypt. This grain should be kept in the cities under Pharaoh's control. Pharaoh and all his advisors thought this was excellent advice. Can we find anyone else like this man, who has the Spirit of God in him? Pharaoh asked his servants. Then Pharaoh turned to Joseph and said, Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as wise and understanding as you are. You will be in charge of my palace, and all my people will obey your orders. Only I, as king, will be greater than you. Pharaoh took off his royal ring and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed Joseph in fine linen clothes and put a gold chain around his neck. He gave Joseph the second-best chariot in Egypt to ride in, and runners went ahead shouting, Make way! So everyone would know to bow down as Joseph passed by. Pharaoh also gave Joseph a new Egyptian name and arranged for him to marry the daughter of an important priest. Joseph was 30 years old, 13 years after his brothers had sold him as a slave. Now he was the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. Just as Joseph had predicted, 7 years of amazing plenty began right away. The crops were so good that there was more grain than anyone could count. Joseph traveled all over Egypt, building huge storehouses and filling them with grain. He saved up so much food that they stopped trying to measure it because it was like counting the sand on the seashore. During these good years, Joseph's wife had 2 sons. Joseph named the first son Manasseh, which means God has made me forget all my troubles and all my father's family. He named the second son Ephraim, which means God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. When the 7 years of plenty ended, the 7 years of famine began, exactly as Joseph had said. The famine was not just in Egypt but in all the countries around Egypt. People everywhere were hungry and desperate for food. But Egypt had plenty of grain stored up in Joseph's storehouses. When the Egyptians cried to Pharaoh for food, he told them, Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians and to people from other countries who came to Egypt looking for food. The famine was very bad in the land of Canaan, where Joseph's father Jacob still lived with his 11 sons. When Jacob heard that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, Why do you just sit here looking at each other? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so we will not die of hunger. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to Egypt to buy grain. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, because he was afraid something bad might happen to him. Jacob had already lost Joseph, and he could not bear to lose Rachel's other son too. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, they had to go to Joseph to buy grain, because he was in charge of selling food to everyone. Joseph recognized his brothers right away, but they did not recognize him. 22 years had passed since they had sold him. Now he was 39 years old, dressed like an Egyptian prince, and speaking the Egyptian language. Joseph remembered his dreams from long ago, about his brothers bowing down to him. Now here they were, bowing down with their faces to the ground, asking to buy food from him. His dreams had come true, but not in the way anyone had expected. Joseph decided not to tell them who he was right away. He wanted to see what kind of men they had become. Speaking to them through an interpreter, he talked to them roughly and accused them of being spies. No, my lord, they said. We are honest men who have come to buy food. We are not spies. We are all brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. Our youngest brother is at home with our father, and one brother is no longer alive. When Joseph heard them mention his younger brother Benjamin and say that one brother was dead, his heart was filled with emotion. But he controlled himself and continued testing them. You are spies, he insisted. I will prove whether you are telling the truth. You will not leave Egypt unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you back to get him, and the rest will stay in prison until he comes. Joseph put all the brothers in prison for 3 days. Then he came to them again and said, "I fear God, so I will give you a chance to prove you are honest. One of you will stay here in prison. The rest of you can go home with grain for your hungry families. But you must bring your youngest brother back to me. This will prove that you are telling the truth and you will not die." The brothers agreed to this plan, but they were very worried. They talked to each other in their own language, not knowing that Joseph could understand them. "We are being punished for what we did to our brother Joseph," they said. "We saw how scared and upset he was when he begged us not to sell him, but we would not listen. That is why this trouble has come to us now." Reuben, who had tried to save Joseph years before, said, "I told you not to hurt the boy, but you would not listen to me. Now we must pay for what we did to him." Joseph had to turn away from them because he started to cry when he heard them talking about what they had done to him. But he controlled his emotions and turned back to them. He chose Simeon to stay in prison and had him tied up in front of the other brothers. Then Joseph secretly ordered his servants to fill the brothers' sacks with grain and to put each man's money back in his sack. He also gave them food for their journey home. The brothers loaded their grain on their donkeys and started back to Canaan. When they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get food for his donkey and found his money in the top of the sack. "My money has been put back in my sack," he told the others. They were all scared and confused. "What is God doing to us?" they asked each other. When they reached home, they told their father Jacob everything that had happened. "The man who rules over Egypt spoke harshly to us and accused us of being spies," they said. "He told us to bring our youngest brother back to prove we are honest men. He kept Simeon in prison, and he said we cannot see him again unless Benjamin comes with us." As they emptied their sacks, each man found his money that had been returned. When Jacob saw all the money, he became even more afraid and upset. "You have taken my children away from me," Jacob cried. "Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin too. Everything is against me." Reuben tried to convince his father to let Benjamin go. "You can kill my 2 sons if I do not bring Benjamin back safely to you," he promised. But Jacob refused. "My son will not go down with you," he said. "His brother Joseph is dead, and Benjamin is the only one left from his mother Rachel. If something happens to him on the journey, you will bring my gray hair down to the grave with sorrow." But the famine continued to be very bad. Soon the family had eaten all the grain they had bought in Egypt. Jacob told his sons, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah reminded him, "The man warned us strictly that we would not see him unless our brother Benjamin is with us. If you will send Benjamin with us, we will go and buy food. But if you will not send him, we will not go, because the man said we cannot see him without Benjamin." Jacob was frustrated. "Why did you tell the man you had another brother? You have brought this trouble on me." "The man asked us many questions about our family," they explained. "He asked if our father was still alive and if we had another brother. We just answered his questions. How could we know he would tell us to bring our brother to Egypt?" Finally, Judah made a promise to his father that convinced him. "I will personally guarantee Benjamin's safety," Judah said. "If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame forever. If we had not waited so long, we could have gone to Egypt and back twice by now." Jacob finally agreed, but he was very worried. "If it must be so," he said, "then take some of the best things from our land as a gift for the man. Take some honey, spices, nuts, and almonds. Take twice as much money as before, and take back the money that was returned in your sacks in case it was a mistake. Take your brother Benjamin, and may God Almighty make the man show mercy to you, so that he will release Simeon and let Benjamin come back home." So the brothers took the gifts, the money, and Benjamin, and they went down to Egypt for the second time. When Joseph saw that Benjamin was with them, he told his house manager, "Take these men to my house and prepare a big meal, because they will eat with me at noon." The brothers were scared when they were brought to Joseph's house. They thought they were in trouble because of the money that had been returned in their sacks. They tried to explain to Joseph's manager what had happened. "We do not know who put our money back in our sacks," they said. We have brought it back and we have more money to buy food. We are honest men. Do not worry, the manager said. Your God and the God of your father must have given you treasure in your sacks. I received your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. The manager took the brothers into Joseph's house and gave them water to wash their feet. He fed their donkeys and told them to get their gifts ready, because they would eat with Joseph at noon. When Joseph came home, the brothers gave him the gifts they had brought and bowed down to the ground before him. Joseph asked them, "How is your old father you told me about? Is he still alive?" "Your servant our father is still alive and well," they answered, and they bowed down again to show respect. Then Joseph looked at Benjamin, his own mother's son, and his heart was filled with love and emotion. "Is this your youngest brother you told me about?" he asked. Then he said to Benjamin, "God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph was so overcome with emotion at seeing his brother that he had to leave the room quickly. He went to his private room and cried. Then he washed his face and came back out, controlling his feelings. Joseph had the servants serve the meal. He sat at his own table, the brothers sat at another table, and the Egyptians sat at a third table because Egyptians did not eat with Hebrews. The brothers were amazed when they were seated in order from the oldest to the youngest, exactly in the right order. How could Joseph know their ages? Joseph sent food to them from his table, but he sent 5 times as much food to Benjamin as to the others. The brothers ate and drank and were happy, not knowing that Joseph was testing them to see if they were still jealous of a favored brother. The next morning, Joseph told his house manager, "Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's money in the top of his sack. Also, put my special silver cup in the youngest brother's sack, along with his money." The manager did exactly what Joseph told him to do. Early in the morning, the brothers were sent on their way with their donkeys loaded with grain. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his manager, "Go after those men right away. When you catch up with them, ask them, 'Why have you paid back good with evil? Why did you steal my master's silver cup? This is the cup he uses for drinking and for telling the future. You have done a very bad thing." When the manager caught up with the brothers, he said exactly what Joseph had told him to say. The brothers were shocked and confused. "Why does my lord say such things?" they asked. "We would never do anything like that. We even brought back the money we found in our sacks last time. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If you find the cup with any of us, that person can die, and the rest of us will become your slaves." "All right," the manager said. "But only the person who has the cup will become a slave. The rest of you will be free to go." Each brother quickly put his sack on the ground and opened it. The manager searched the sacks, starting with the oldest brother and ending with the youngest. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. The brothers were devastated. They tore their clothes to show their grief and shock. They loaded their donkeys again and went back to the city, knowing they were in terrible trouble. When they arrived at Joseph's house, Joseph was still there waiting for them. The brothers threw themselves on the ground before him. Joseph said, "What have you done? Do you not know that a man like me can find out secrets?" Judah spoke for all the brothers. "What can we say to my lord? How can we prove our innocence? God has found out our guilt. We are all your slaves now, both we and the one who had the cup." But Joseph said, "I would never do such a thing. Only the man who had the cup will be my slave. The rest of you can go back to your father in peace." Then Judah came close to Joseph and said, "Please, my lord, let me speak a word to you. Do not be angry with me, even though you are as powerful as Pharaoh himself. You asked us if we had a father or a brother. We told you that we have an old father and a young brother who was born when our father was old. This boy's brother is dead, so he is the only one left from his mother, and our father loves him very much. You told us to bring the boy to you, and we said that the boy could not leave his father because if he left, his father would die. But you said that unless our youngest brother came with us, we could not see you again. When we went back to our father, we told him what you had said. When our father told us to come back and buy more food, we said we could not go unless our youngest brother came with us. Then our father said to us, You know that my wife Rachel had 2 sons. One went away from me, and I said he must have been torn to pieces, because I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too and something happens to him, you will bring my gray hair down to the grave in sorrow. Now, if I go back to my father without the boy, and our father sees that the boy is not with us, he will die of grief, because his life is bound up with the boy's life. We will be responsible for bringing our father's gray hair down to the grave in sorrow. I promised my father that I would keep the boy safe. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you forever. So please, let me stay here as your slave instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I cannot bear to see the pain that would come to my father. When Joseph heard Judah's speech, he could not control himself any longer. He had heard enough to know that his brothers had changed. They were no longer the jealous, cruel men who had sold him as a slave. Now they were willing to sacrifice themselves to protect Benjamin and their father. Joseph ordered all his Egyptian servants to leave the room. Then, with only his brothers present, Joseph cried so loudly that the Egyptians in the house could hear him, and the news reached Pharaoh's palace. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? His brothers were so shocked and scared that they could not answer him. They could not believe that this powerful Egyptian ruler was their brother Joseph, the one they had sold as a slave so many years ago. Joseph said to them, "Come closer to me." When they came closer, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Now, do not be upset or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was God who sent me ahead of you to save lives. There have been 2 years of famine in the land, and there will be 5 more years with no plowing or harvest. But God sent me ahead of you to make sure you and your families would survive and to save your lives in an amazing way. So it was not really you who sent me here, but God. He made me like a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire house, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me right away. You will live in the land of Goshen and be near me, you and your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and everything you have. I will take care of you there, because there are still 5 years of famine coming. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become poor. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really me speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor I have in Egypt and about everything you have seen. And bring my father down here quickly." Then Joseph hugged his brother Benjamin and cried, and Benjamin cried too. Joseph kissed all his brothers and cried over them. After that, his brothers were able to talk with him. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers to load their animals and go back to Canaan. Tell them to bring your father and your families and come back to Egypt. I will give them the best land in Egypt, and they will eat the fat of the land. Also tell them to take carts from Egypt for their children and wives, and to bring your father back. Do not worry about bringing your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours." So Joseph's brothers did what Pharaoh said. Joseph gave them carts and food for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of clothes. To his father he sent 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other food for his father's journey. As his brothers were leaving, Joseph said to them, "Do not quarrel on the way." So the brothers went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in Canaan. They told him, "Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt." Jacob was shocked and did not believe them at first. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, Jacob's spirit revived. "I am convinced," he said. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob took everything he owned and went to Egypt with all his descendants. When they reached the border of Egypt, Jacob sent Judah ahead to get directions from Joseph about where to go in Goshen. Joseph prepared his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father. When Joseph appeared before him, He threw his arms around his father and cried for a long time. Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Joseph brought some of his brothers and his father to meet Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked Jacob, "How old are you?" Jacob answered, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land, in the region of Ramesses, just as Pharaoh had commanded. Joseph also provided food for his father, his brothers, and all his father's household, giving them enough for all their children. The famine continued to be very severe throughout Egypt and Canaan. Joseph collected all the money that people paid for grain and brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the people had no more money, they came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die in front of you? Our money is all gone." Joseph said, "Bring your livestock, and I will sell you food in exchange for your animals." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. He kept them alive with food for 1 year in exchange for all their livestock. When that year was over, they came to him again and said, "We cannot hide from our lord that our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you. There is nothing left except our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we will be servants to Pharaoh." So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. Every Egyptian sold his field because the famine was so severe. The land became Pharaoh's property. Joseph made the people servants from one end of Egypt to the other. The only land he did not buy was the land that belonged to the priests, because they received food from Pharaoh and did not need to sell their land. Joseph said to the people, "Now that I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you to plant in the ground. When harvest time comes, you must give 1/5 of your crops to Pharaoh. The other 4/5 will be yours to use as seed for the fields and as food for yourselves, your households, and your children." The people said, "You have saved our lives. We are happy to be Pharaoh's servants." So Joseph made it a law in Egypt that 1/5 of all crops belonged to Pharaoh. This law continued for many years. Jacob and his family lived in Egypt for 17 years. Jacob lived to be 147 years old. When the time came for Jacob to die, he called his son Joseph and said, "If you love me, promise me that you will not bury me in Egypt. When I die, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where my fathers are buried." Joseph promised, "I will do as you say." Then Jacob bowed down at the head of his bed to show his thanks to God. Sometime later, Joseph was told that his father was sick. So Joseph took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to see Jacob. When Jacob heard that Joseph was coming, he gathered his strength and sat up in bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at a place called Luz in Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, 'I will make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land to your descendants as an everlasting possession. Now your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in Egypt before I came to you here, will be mine. Just as Reuben and Simeon are my sons, so Ephraim and Manasseh will be my sons. They will inherit land with their uncles." Jacob's eyes were weak because of his old age, and he could not see well. Joseph brought his sons close to Jacob, and Jacob kissed them and hugged them. Jacob said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too." Then Jacob blessed Joseph's sons. He put his right hand on Ephraim's head, even though Ephraim was the younger son, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the older son. Joseph tried to move his father's hands because he thought Jacob had made a mistake. "Not that way, my father," Joseph said. "This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But Jacob refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. Manasseh will also become a people, and he will become great. But his younger brother will be greater than he is, and his descendants will become a group of nations." So Jacob blessed them that day. After Jacob finished blessing his sons, He pulled his feet up into the bed, took his last breath and died. Joseph threw himself on his father's face and cried over him and kissed him. Then Joseph ordered the doctors who served him to prepare his father's body for burial. It took 40 days to prepare the body, and the Egyptians mourned for Jacob 70 days. When the days of mourning were over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's court and said, "My father made me promise to bury him in the land of Canaan. Please let me go up and bury my father, and then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you promise." So Joseph went up to bury his father, and all Pharaoh's officials went with him. All the elders of Egypt and all of Joseph's household and his brothers and his father's household went too. They left only their children, their flocks, and their herds in Goshen. It was a very large group that went up with Joseph. When they reached a place called the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, they mourned loudly and bitterly for 7 days. The people who lived in that area said, "The Egyptians are having a very sad time of mourning." So that place was called Abel Mizraim, which means mourning of the Egyptians. Jacob's sons did exactly what he had commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre. This was the field that Abraham had bought as a burial place. After burying their father, Joseph and his brothers and all the others who had gone with them to bury Jacob returned to Egypt. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers for the sins and wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to Joseph, he cried. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he spoke kindly to them and comforted them. Joseph stayed in Egypt, along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw his great-great-grandchildren. Joseph lived long enough to see his family grow into a large group of people. When Joseph was about to die, he said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to help you and take you up out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made his brothers promise, "God will surely come to help you, and when he does, you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at the age of 110. They prepared his body for burial and put it in a coffin in Egypt. Many years later, when God rescued the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt, they remembered Joseph's request. They carried his bones with them when they left Egypt and buried them in the Promised Land, just as Joseph had asked. Joseph's life shows us that God can use even the worst things that happen to us for good purposes. Joseph's brothers meant to hurt him when they sold him as a slave, but God used that terrible experience to put Joseph in a position where he could save many people's lives during the famine. Joseph never forgot his family, even when he became powerful and successful. He forgave his brothers for what they had done to him, and he took care of them for the rest of their lives. Joseph's story teaches us about forgiveness, faithfulness, and trusting God even when life is hard. From a young man with dreams wearing a colorful coat, to a slave in a foreign land, to a prisoner forgotten in jail, to the second most powerful man in Egypt, Joseph's life was full of surprises. But through it all, God was with him, preparing him for the special work he would do. Joseph's story reminds us that God has a plan for our lives, even when we cannot see it. Sometimes the hardest experiences in our lives are preparing us for something important that God wants us to do later. Like Joseph, we can choose to trust God and do what is right, no matter how people treat us. The young man who was thrown into a pit by his jealous brothers became the man who saved those same brothers from starving. The slave who was falsely accused and thrown into prison became the ruler who fed the hungry. The dreamer who seemed to have lost everything became the leader who made his dreams come true in ways he never could have imagined. Joseph's story is a story of hope. It shows us that no matter how dark our situation looks, God can turn it around for good. It teaches us to be patient when life is hard, to work faithfully even when no one notices, and to forgive people who have hurt us. Most importantly, Joseph's story shows us that God keeps his promises. God had promised Abraham that his descendants would become a great nation. Through Joseph's wise leadership during the famine, Jacob's family grew and was kept safe in Egypt until they were ready to become the nation of Israel. The boy with the colorful coat had become a man with a colorful life, full of both sorrow and joy, slavery and freedom, prison and palace. But through it all, Joseph remembered that God was with him, and that made all the difference.